Our kids are now more dysregulated than they ever have been. When we look at evolution, we come from groups of people. The old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. We don't have a village anymore. We're more disconnected than we've ever have been. We always say that the kids are resilient. Kids aren't resilient. Kids just form coping strategies in challenging times. From the minute we're born, we're trying to silence kids rather than validate kids. There is a difference between being a father and being a dad. But I just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin with what being a dad is like. I knew that I could do better. I just didn't know how to do it. Parenting is learning, and as parents, we tell kids rather than model to kids. What we need to do with our young people is not be the authoritarian and tell them what to do. Let's be with them and let's show them what to do.
What's your relationship like with the little person inside now?
I am the person now that I want to be, and I don't have to run away from that person anymore.
Joey Williams, welcome to the Better Project podcast. We've been trying to get this alignment for a while now. We did our first podcast in September 2021, so 2 years ago. Wow. And we've been trying to get it in person. It's a Monday morning. We're in the studio. Welcome, bro. How's things?
Good. It's really, like you said, we've been trying to sort of nail this down for a couple of years in person. Because I much rather, I do loads and loads of podcasts and stuff like that. And I like the energy of sitting here, having a conversation about it. Plus, like graphics are better,
everything's better.
Reshare things on your Instagram and social pages because the podcast space is growing without a doubt. But the social media space is there and it's still growing and short videos and little things like that are great. So I always like to do podcasts where I can in person because the energy's better, and the product, what it comes to is a better result in the end as well.
So what's been happening those last 2 years since we last spoke?
Heaps, man, heaps. Like just lots of growth as a person. It's this path of where we are on as humans or where we are as people, and we get taken on these paths in these different directions right through our life around different things. And what I'm doing now and what I'm being, I guess, pulled towards now is something I never thought I'd ever do. Whilst it's still around that, the well-being space and mental health space. And I've been in that trauma conversation for a number of years now, but I'm working more with parenting, and that, like for people who I've been a parent for 19 years, almost 19 years to the month actually, and like who I was as a parent then to who I am as a parent now are just two different people. Like who I am as a person back then and who I am as a person now are just two different people, right? So like always going through life, evolving, growing, all of that. But the space that I've been moving into lately is a lot around that parenting space, but also working more and more with younger people, right? So it's a reflection of the fact that I'm working with younger people and their well-being and development of what that looks like. And then I guess it's very aligned with parenting because it's working with younger people, if you know what I mean. So just loving it. I actually it was one of those things, my partner, she sent me a picture. You get those reminders, like a reminder of 3 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever, on social media. She always sends pictures of the kids and of our little one Frankie, and she was challenging early days because she had some reflux challenges and stuff like that. And Courtney said to me, "I miss her being this little," and I said, "For me, it's more comfortable being with her now. Like I love her now because I felt back then I didn't know what I was doing. That was my fifth and last child.
And you didn't know
I still didn't know what I was doing. You know what? Well, I knew what I was doing because if it comes to a survival state, I'd know what you're doing, right? But I just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin with what's being a dad is like. And that's a really super vulnerable comment. And people could even judge that, right? But I think as well, and Courtney said, she goes, you were more hands-on with this girl than you were with the older boy, right? And I think because she had those really big challenges, and that's where I started to learn about emotional regulation, and kids just they need to be taught, or we need to model to them how to regulate, rather than just whacking them in a room and hoping they fall asleep by themselves, right? So that whole growth of what it is, and why I say, I'm probably more comfortable with her now, is because she's 6, like she can do things herself, and she's super independent. She's super challenging and independent as a little 6-year-old, but she's just like Frankie. I'm talking about my 6-year-old. She's just super cheeky, and
she a little wild child.
Yeah, most definitely is. And I love that, because that's what's been my whole work life, working with the inverted commas wild child. The kids who are challenged. She's not challenged by any behaviours by any means, but she's just going through the natural evolution of growth and development as a young person. And I understand that more now, where once upon a time I would have silenced that without understanding what that is. And that's probably a society way that we deal with things and deal with challenges with young people. Now we silence it, right? But I know now that I can articulate and have conversations with this young 6-year-old, and then knowing the little tips and tools that I have to help her regulate and validate what it is that she's going through. It's just night and day from the way that I used to do things in comparison to how I do things now, and also the response that we get from those little ones who are going through those challenging times when we validate and understand their emotions, in comparison to just silencing them, keeping them quiet, and send them to their room.
Yeah. What are some of those tips that people can implement to help, with their little ones regulate their emotions?
Yeah, so I follow a stack load of parenting pages and stuff like that, and I felt really uncomfortable at first having the old conversation. Like they probably dull it down a little bit when they're talking about the way that they do it in validation of the young people's emotions, where I can see that hurts you. I understand that you're going through a really challenging time now. What can I do about it? What can I do to help? And it was I wasn't even going as over top as what some of the parenting pages I follow do now. So, but just having that conversation with them when my young one's having a meltdown, instead of me going, be quiet, pull your socks up, get on with it. Like saying, darling, I can see that you're upset. Darling, I know that things are that you're having a challenging time now. Can Dad have a hug? Would you like a hug? And if she doesn't want one, then I don't make her have one. It's really empowering who she is and her voice, and seeing her and all the kids, right? Because they're all very different, and they're all going through different developmental changes. And the oldest one, he's nearly 19. The human brain isn't finished developing, as a kid. When we have these expectations of what kids are and how they like young boys, their brain doesn't finish developing until they're into their 20s, So it's about understanding that and being on that journey of that with all of the kids at different ages, from almost 19 to 17 to 12 to 10 to 6. All of my kids are on different areas of where they're at brain development wise. So it's the biggest challenge in all of that is challenging yourself to do the research, do the learning, and do the understanding when they're having those challenging times. Because we think as parents that we're the bosses and, we need to be the one who's the authoritarian in those times, where right in those times, doesn't matter what age they are, hell of a lot of the time they just need a hug and to be held and validated and let them know that you got their back and you're with them in a really challenging time, and you can see that they're upset.
Yeah, it gives them the confidence to actually have a voice and be who they need to be. And like small things, like my daughter's 2 and she's my wild child and into everything, and in Miss Little Independence she is, and her way or the highway. But it's like small things like, oh, I want a yogurt or I want a banana, and she's already had 1 or 2 earlier in the day. I was like, no, darling, like you've already had one. We can have one tomorrow. Let's have something else. And she has a tantrum. I was like, okay, deep breath. Do you want to cuddle? And like, she's only 2, but she's kind of getting the concept. Like, she'll pause for a second and she'll see me do the deep breath, and she'll kind of try to do it herself. But she's learning that regulation now, and it's improving, like less tantrums, stuff like that. And she's understanding, okay, cool. I've already had banana today. I can have one tomorrow, or I can have something else.
You just made a point that's really, really important that we don't do enough. Is that as parents we tell kids rather than model to kids. So you just said then, she sees me take a deep breath.
Yeah.
Like that's modeling to the young person, which gives them an indication or a tip or a tool that they can use in those challenging times. Because like we get it as adults, we know it because, and we have these tools to just bang off straight away, but they don't yet. They're just going through a really tough time, and they don't have the words to explain or the articulation to even explain what that feeling is. So they just lose it. And what that does in a lot of cases, that triggers us as the adult. And when we don't have the ability to regulate in those moments, how on earth can we expect them to have the ability to regulate in those moments? So a lot of what we've got this all wrong as a society. We think that we are the adult, so we have to tell, rather than we are the more experienced, so we have to model. And that's some of the biggest things that I've learned with everything that I do as a parent, because our little people are just watching everything we do.
You're not a dictator, you're a leader.
There's a difference, isn't it? There's a difference. Like E.T. the hip-hop preacher, Dr. Eric Thomas, he says he's not a leader, he's a shepherd. Right? So leaders lead, shepherds are with the people. So he models. It's what we need to do with our young people is not be the authoritarian and tell them what to do. Let's be with them and let's show them what to do. And that can be really, really hard, really, really difficult for a lot of people who have never done that, who have never been taught that, who have never been shown that. So, like, I've been on a real journey the last X amount of years of just learning about this stuff and learning and also implementing. So you see these really, what you think on these social media pages, you're like, I could do that. Like, that's a bit over the top. I'm not going to speak to my kids like that. And yes, darling, I can see that you're hurting right now. What can daddy do to make those, to make everything better? But then I tried it and I was like, holy shit, this works. Right? And then you tweak things to your little way and the little things that your young people respond to, right? So you find out, like with Frankie, like when she's losing it, I just put my arms out. Can dad have a hug? And then if, there'll be times where she doesn't want a hug and she'll tell me that she doesn't want a hug. And there'll be other times that you just bring her in and you just hold her and then you start to rock a little bit and then she starts to regulate because they just don't have the articulation to tell us how they feel, right? They're tired. They don't know what it is. She's in kindergarten, so her little brain is just exploding with all this new information and all these new synapses building within her brain, natural evolution of our brain in the way it does and the cycles that we go through. But we just fly through life as parents and just we dictate a little bit. But our kids, our young people, they just need, I believe, they just need to be modelled the right thing to do rather than told what the right thing to do is.
Do you feel like there's a lot of pressure on parents, especially like for myself, first becoming a parent, then you go on to social media and like you said, all these pages pop up and all these tips on how to parent. Do you feel like we're overcomplicating it and we're trying to implement all these things? Like there's no instruction manual that comes with a kid. We kind of got to learn as we go. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to, I guess, be the best parent for our children. But at the same time, I feel like we overcomplicate it. When it simply, as what we've been speaking about, it's holding that space for our children and modeling and letting them feel safe, to them to come to you, cuddle, kiss. You know, if you need to have a cry, have a cry. But letting them understand their emotions. And as I said, like, take a deep breath, like all those small things, but we overcomplicate it.
So I think like words are really important, right? Is that when we're looking at, are we overcomplicating it when we're doing it this new way, or are we just going against the way that we've been taught and told for generations? And this new way is actually simplifying it. Like we're not actually complicating it. We look at it as it's complicated to do it because it's a new tool. It's actually not complicated to do it. And if we look at, is it complicated or what's very real is that our kids are now more dysregulated than they ever have been, you know, and we look at the diagnosis rates around anxiety and depression in our young people, it's a direct reflection of how we parent and the way that we raise our young people in the systems that we raise our young people. Like, one of the biggest challenges that we have today is that we live in a singular home with one mum, one dad, if we're lucky. There's a hell of a lot of families that have come from broken homes and you know, one parent, and it's probably not even fair to call it, you know, a broken home. But there's because those parents, you know, they get the job done. But when we look at evolution, we come from groups of people. The old saying, it takes a village to raise a child. We don't have a village anymore. And that's one of the biggest challenges I see, is that because we talk about complicating things, but are the parenting tips complicated, or is the world that we live in complicated the way we're doing it? Right? Because what we're doing now is not conducive to the family unit of how it's been for thousands and thousands of years. The way that we live, we're pushing kids out the door to go to before school care, so then they can go to school, and then they're in after school care because of the cost of living and the challenges that we have as parents. We need to be at work longer hours. We now work longer than we've ever worked. We don't work 9 to 5 anymore. You know, we're checking our emails the first thing we get up in the morning, and then we're the last thing before we go to bed, we're still checking them. And we probably work till you know, not physically, but till 10, 11 o'clock at night, because we're constantly on. That's having a massive effect on everything that we do. Our sleep patterns we sleep less than we've ever slept, which is having a direct impact on how we parent our kids, because we're not going to bed until super late at night, and then we've got to get up early in the morning because we've got to get our kids to preschool, daycare, before school care, and then because we had lack of sleep the night before, we're in a horrible mood and screaming at our kids before they get out in the morning. Mm-hmm. And then we wonder why they have a challenging day. And we go and we putting our kids into these before school and daycare centers and things like that, where it's multiple people raising our kids, but our kids aren't building the strong connection and attachments that we've always built for thousands of years with our soul carers. And that is the biggest challenge in my eyes that we have, because everything, the way that you live the way that you operate in your relationships now as adults and for the rest of our lives is all determined by the early attachments we make and how secure those attachments are in the very early years in our lives.
How do we solve that challenge?
Rebuild the village.
How do we do that? Got a plan?
I don't get paid enough money to be a politician and make those sort of decisions. But what I do is advocate with a lot of workplaces, and you will see it. A lot of workplaces are having, like a 9-day fortnight, right? Where they'll have that extra day. Well, they'll give that extra. They have a long weekend every second week or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the important thing is around all of that is, if we're having a long weekend every second week, or 4-day weeks, or whatever it looks like, we can't be going getting on the piss all weekend. So we're then hungover Sunday and hungover Monday as well. Like, we need to have those times to start to rebuild our family unit and our village to what that looks like. Says me, who's on the road 300 days in a year. Like, I get that. I understand that. But the work I do is very different to a lot of people's work, and the work I do now, prior to the pandemic, I'm home a hell of a lot more than I've ever been in the last 10 years, and it shows with the relationships I have with the younger people in my life, and the more time I'm spending, with the older ones, on the, whether it's not in the physical because they live in different locations, but more time in relationship that I'm building with those young people just to get to understand who they are and the challenges they have and the needs that they have, and try and help with that.
Do you feel like it's quality over quantity? So like a parent, they work all day, their child goes to school. Yeah, a lot of times parents come home and they're on their phone or they're watching TV. Put that stuff down and spend quality time with your children, so then they know, hey, like, my parent actually kind of cares about me. He's not just putting a roof over my head. Because that's the big thing for me is, like, my daughter's in preschool 3 days a week. Then she's with my mum the other days, and then with us. But when she gets home, the biggest priority of mine is to spend quality time with her. So we're always at the back running around with the dog and just going to the park, doing all these things. Because for me growing up, I never had that connection, especially with my dad. He was always out working, and mum was working and stuff like that too. So a big thing for me when I became a parent was having that connection piece with my daughter and spending that quality time with them. And it is hard for a lot of parents, as you said, cost of living, everything like that. We've got to work, we've got to be on the road, we've got to do things. So does it come back to, when you are home, when you are with your kids, spending that quality time with them? Yeah, and
we're going to look at what we're escaping when we're doing that. When we're home, and there's a hell of a lot of people that on the social media too much, on their phones and their laptops or whatever it looks like too much. I'm one of them. I can't for 1 minute sit here and say that I'm perfect with it, because I'm one of them. We're to look at what we're running away from in those devices. Because so many people struggle to sit in the present moment. The biggest challenge throughout the pandemic was people's mental health. And this can be a really challenging thing to hear, but a hell of a lot of those people couldn't sit in silence with themselves. So the mental health challenges were skyrocketing because we couldn't sit in the present by ourselves. We couldn't sit still because we're constantly moving, we're constantly growing, we're constantly wanting to do things. But there's so many people that are keeping themselves busy because the noise inside their head's too loud. Hello, one of them sitting opposite you. So one of the biggest things for me is about learning to slow down and learning to be present with those young people. And I don't for 1 minute, and I apologise for my comments a little bit a scratch earlier when I was talking about how our young people are being forced out the door into daycare centres and things like that. I understand that the cost of living is super tight, and we have to work, and that's the thing that we're challenged with. Like that, I don't think that's a parenting issue, because parents would love to stay at home with their kids. I think that's like an issue with inflation and cost of living and the demand for people to be out the door to work because they have to put a roof over their head of the young people. And the way that we're doing that is just not conducive to how we should be living as people. So any wonder why the mental health rates are skyrocketing? Any wonder why the anxiety challenges are skyrocketing with young people? It's all because of early attachments, not being able to self-soothe and regulate our own emotions. Like, it's a direct relationship. Whether we want to hear it or not, it's a direct relationship from the way that we have evolved as human beings. And why so many people are unwell with the mental health rates in our communities is because our society is sick. It's not the people. It's the way that we're living. The way that we're being forced to live is what's causing these challenges. Right? So have a look at it. Right? And I said this in a chat with Mark Burris on the Mark Burris podcast a while ago now. I said, and you have to think about this now, right? There's more mental health and there's more money in mental health than there ever has been. There's more conversations about mental health and stigma and you need to speak up and we need more to reach out for help than there ever has been. There's more resources than there ever has been. There's more education than there ever has been. Yet we're dying more than ever. We're being medicated more than ever. We're being diagnosed more than ever with mental health problems. So it's not that there's not enough money. It's not that there's not enough resources being pushed into that, because it's higher than it ever has been. If the mental health challenges are continuing to rise, it's a direct indication of the way that we're living and the world that we're living in. And we just really need to look at what that model is. And this is where, like, I talk about this so loudly, and this is what, I've just started a PhD, so this is what my research will be about, is about looking at our old ways and what we did and why we did it. Because what we did worked.
In terms of Indigenous culture?
Yeah, our cultures, Indigenous peoples all over the world. Mm-hmm. But our people predominantly, as the oldest people in the world, the oldest documentation of human existence in the world is right here in this country. We have so much to learn from that, right? Because what we did worked as far as the way that we raised our young people, the village that we had, right? What we're doing, if we're dying more than ever, and the incarceration rates are getting higher than ever, then what we're doing is not working. Like, it's not rocket science.
Mm-hmm. One thing that stuck with me from our first episode that we did together was you explained, as an Indigenous person, you're walking in two worlds. You've got your culture here, you've got Western society here. Yeah, a lot of Indigenous are getting actually pulled away from their culture and sucked into this Western world. But as a white fella, what can we learn from Indigenous culture and implement into our lives to, increase our well-being and our happiness in our life?
You have a look at like so much of what we did. We did things, it's well documented that the evolution of human beings started in groups of people, right? So doing things together. There's a brilliant book called Lost Connections by Johan Hari. He talks about how we're more disconnected than we've ever have been as a human race. So looking at different things like that, the new and crazy fad called earthing, taking your shoes off and walking, mm-hmm. Like we did that for thousands of years. We just, because we never had shoes, right? It's a funny story, but it relates directly to it. I was sitting in a uni lecture at the University of Wollongong, and the lecturer was talking about mindfulness and meditation and all of these new whiz-bang things that help with our well-being. And I said, everything you just named, our people did for thousands of years already. You just gave it a new name. Yeah. Right? Even with earthing. Like, we walked with no shoes for thousands of years. Like, we were connected to the earth. We worked with the earth, the rhythms of the earth, and worked with that, not against that. Right? So there is so much that our old people did that we can learn from. And it starts with connecting to people. It starts with living with the values, living with all of our old Dreamtime stories, all of our old dreaming stories. They're all got deeply embedded lessons and values. Those old stories aren't just pretty picture books we talk about now in schools. Those old stories had purpose to the way that we should be living. And I'm just really excited by the next journey that I'm on with this research journey, is because, I'm gonna start to look at talking about that and what it did, why it worked, essentially.
Because I've seen a quote as well on your Instagram. You said Indigenous people spend 2 hours a day doing purposeful things, and the rest is spent with connection and love. It's kind of hard to do that in this society right now. So how can we kind of implement that? Is that coming back to when we do have that downtime, making sure it's quality?
So that was a conversation that Uncle Paul Gordon spoke about, and he talked about it with some of the early documentation of the early white people that were here that I guess observed our old people, and they said that the original peoples there of that time did purposeful things, like the things that they needed to do, the purposeful things that they needed to do in that day for 2 or 3 hours a day, and the rest of the time was spent building relationships with our young people, modeling good behaviours, and modeling, and then obviously the challenging behaviours as well, looking at what they were and why they were, and start to address those. But obviously we can't live like that now. But there is so much in those old ways that we can learn from. So I think whilst right now we've probably got the least amount of time that we've ever had with our family unit, I suggest during those times that we have with our family unit, make sure that we're building relationships and continuing to grow, and what that looks like. Because our young people are getting further away from, who we've always been as parents as well. Like our relationships are being more fragmented and fractured within our family units because of that. There's a great book by Gabor Mate, Hold On to Your Kids, and it talks about how kids are being raised by other kids now, with social media and the influences that they follow on social media, but also their relationships in the schoolyard and things like that. Because, there's a hell of a lot of families out there that the kids are spending more time building relationships in the schoolyard than they are with their actual primary attachments, which is their mums and dads and grandparents and so forth. So this stuff isn't opinionated. It's evident, because our kids are more disconnected and challenged than ever. I work in the school system, and I think a lot of teachers will agree with me in what I say, is that kids now are more challenged than they've ever been because of I believe it's because of our relationships at home, and what we do. And again, not a point the finger moment, but it's a teaching moment or a learning moment where we can start to have a look at what it is that we do and how we do it, and build better relationships in our family home.
Have you found that challenging with your oldest kids, since you said they're not at home, and you've only kind of recently really started diving into this whole parenthood work and building the connection with your youngest kids? Do you feel like you've got a bit of catching up or challenge with the older ones?
That's hard, right? Because you look at the evolution of how we parent in our throughout our lifetime. We've got our kids that absolutely need us in everything that we do. We need to feed them, we need to change them, we need to bath them, we need to hold them and regulate them and things like that. So they are absolutely they need us in those moments, and then they get a little bit more independent, throughout as they grow up and grow older, and then they get to the early teen years, and then they start to push away from us, and as parents we're starting to we struggle with that, because it's our own attachments that we're having challenges with that. We're fearing that our kids are going to abandon us, You know, and then that's when the fights happen with our kids, and without understanding that they're just going through a process of the brain that naturally occurs and has done for thousands of years, but we just had other people to take up the slack then. You know, so for me, it's been a real challenge. But learning about brain development, learning about I guess the way that young people evolve, learning about that stuff has helped me, because they push us away for a number of years and then they start to come back to us again, right? When they're pushing away from us, I'm not saying let them push us away. I'm saying continue your relationship, but build a trust. So those kids know that they can come back to you and they can turn to you at any time that they need, because they will come back. You know, all the older ones, they always say it. You know, they'll come back. It's all right. They'll come back when they're ready. It's a shame, because we, you know, as parents, we go like, I did everything for that kid, you know, like, and now they don't want to go near us. But it's just a natural evolutionary process, and it'll get to the time when they're old enough and you know, they're looking after us as elders, and they're taking care of us. So what started out as us looking after, doing everything for them as babies, actually goes to full circle for when we're elders. Our young people will then turn to look after us.
Yeah.
You know, so like it's a patience game with that, and I just say, and I'm learning this and getting better at this, and it's just about continuing to build relationship and trust. So when those kids go through those challenging times, they know that they can turn on you at any moment, right? They're not scared. I want to build relationships with my kids where they're not scared to turn to me when they need something, right? Because they'll go out and they'll get on the piss and they'll go out and do different things that we all did. But I don't want them to be terrified to ring dad if something goes wrong.
Mm.
We've all heard the conversation, my dad will kill me if he finds out I'm not. You know what? I'll say this openly now, I ain't gonna kill you. It might hurt me a little bit, but why we hurt as parents, kids don't understand, because we don't model that to them. And when we address it, kids don't understand that it's just coming from a place of fear and coming from a place of love, that we want to make sure that our kids are okay. But we need to get better at that as parents without losing our top straight away and blasting down on them when they do things that we probably did too.
Yeah.
Right? But we judge them because we come from a place of fear and safety. We don't want them to do the mistakes that we made. But they have to make them. They're going to make them. How we respond to them is the important thing as well in all of that, in terms of relationship building. I want to be that dad.
Yeah.
You know? Like, I know that my kids know, particularly my daughter, Phoenix. You know, she's 17. She knows that if things are challenging, she knows that she can call me, because how can I judge? You know, it's everything I did's published in my book for the world to read.
Mm-hmm.
And anything that there's a hell of a lot in my book I didn't publish. You know, so we just can't judge. We just got to build relationships and help teach our young people what life is about through honesty and love and compassion and empathy and non-judgment when they stub their toe. I won't say when they make mistakes, when they stub their toe. You know, we just got to be that person there to pick them up when they fall.
And through building those relationships and that trust, it also, for example, probably gave your daughter Phoenix the confidence to go out there and move to the big smoke and take on that challenge of chasing a career in rugby league. It's because she knows if stuff goes wrong or, you know, stub your toe, like you said, she can always fall back on that.
Her and the oldest boy, Bro, they've always lived down here.
Yeah, okay.
Always lived down here with their mum. And the city's a scary place, man. it's probably it's probably not as scary for people who live in the city, but for young people from the bush, like it's big, it's fast, it's loud. But there's also those different challenges and dangers that we know as adults now that we can logically think about and understand. But again, we just got to help young people with the tools that, whilst they will go through these different challenging times, like they will also go through a developmental process with their brain where they can't logically make decent decisions because a certain part of their brain shuts down, right? We've all heard the conversation of, my teenager just doesn't listen. It's because that part of the brain around logical choice just isn't functioning wonderful. That's the same thing we all went through. That's a developmental human process. When you understand that, you know that, okay, well, I just need to have to change the tact in how I converse things, how I communicate things, rather than just shout at kids. When they're doing when they're finding their feet, words are important again. I can't say when they're making mistakes, when they're finding their feet in what it is that they're experiencing, So parenting is learning, man. It's about learning how to be a good person, a good model, but also not a role model, a real model. We can't sit there and talk about things that we're doing if we're not doing them ourselves. Like, we need to model these behaviours. And I won't for 1 minute say that I'm perfect at any of that, because I'm not. And I'll just always learn, and I'll always try my best. And even sometimes my best isn't beautiful. It isn't great. But trying my best allows me to also reflect. I'm someone who reflects a stack load around words and what I do. And because I know that words are powerful, they can pick someone up or put someone down. So I always say words are important. But what's even more important is actions in what we do and how we model things.
Talk to me about the realization you had around the difference between being a father and being a dad. That was of recent. What was that moment for you where you realized, I've been a father for 18, 19 years, but I haven't really been a dad for that whole time? What was that like for you?
You said it's again, there's my observation. You said it's a recent realization. I've known about it for a long time. I just didn't have the confidence to say it.
Okay.
Right, because I knew that my parenting wasn't great. I knew that I had to do better. I knew that I could do better. I just didn't know how to do it. And there were moments where I just went, no, you know what? I'm gonna learn. Like, learning is the biggest part of it, all of it. And the pandemic allowed me to do that because I was so busy prior to that in 150 communities a year, bouncing from one community to the next, day after day, week after week, all year, and then everything stopping. So I will say, and I understand this is challenging for people to hear, the pandemic was the best thing that ever happened to me. The lockdowns was the best thing that ever happened to me because it allowed me to stop and do the work on myself that I needed to do, that I was putting off for so many years, that allows me to be the best possible person and best possible dad that I can be. And during that time, there was a couple of realizations. As you said, I realized that, holy shit, I don't know how to do this thing. Right? Like I also realized, and it was during those times of having, Frankie was just she was a baby, 18 months, 2-year-old, when she was waking up in the morning and then, when she needed to have a nap and when she needed to have lunch and then trying to organize all the online meetings around that. And Courtney wasn't at home because Courtney was a childcare worker, so she had to be at work. So I had the kids doing the homeschooling stuff and all of that. I will say my kids did a hell of a lot more PE outside than they did inside with the books. But I just went, like, there were so many times that night I just went, like, Courtney come home and she goes, oh, how was the day? And I'm just like, how do you do that?
It's a full-time gig, isn't it?
How do you do it? Like, like mums and parents or single parents or people who the load, who cop a lot of the parenting load a lot more than the other parent. I was like, how do you do that? The respect for that just went another level. I remember I had Brody home at the time as well. So it was during those lockdown times. Courtney got really, really sick and she ended up in hospital. And for her, it was probably just her body saying, you need to have a rest and you need to stop yourself. And it was probably another message to say, hey, Joe needs to step up, because she was in hospital, for a week. And I had to manage the house. I was like, gee whiz. And I'm like going to bed at finish doing the final things of the night at like 11:30, 11:45, like laying into bed. And I'm going, like, how am I going to bed at 11:45? Like, I haven't done nothing except look after everything that was supposed to be done. And then I'm going, man, like, I just sit by and observe everything that Courtney does in the house, and it's just not fair on the load. So I realized with that time as well that those were real growing moments for me, realizing that there is a difference between being a father and being a dad, and going through those times and processes of learning about emotions and validation myself and what it's like to be a parent and to be a dad. And then starting to implement that. Like, there is a difference between being a father and being a dad. Well, I also understand that there is a big difference between a father and being a dad, because there's a hell of a lot of guys in the home that haven't been modeled how to be a dad. Right. So for me, it was, for me personally, I always had a great relationship with my dad growing up. I was really lucky in that perspective. But for me, I just wanted to do things different, and I was really lucky that I've been able to learn and implement different things for me as a parent in emotionally validating our young people, in emotionally helping them to grow as young people, because there's an old philosophy in our world as well, in the First Peoples world, is that we want to leave the place better than we found it, right? So what I mean by that is, with our kids and our grandkids, I want to leave the world physically better for them than I found it, right? And what that means is whatever it is, whether it's the physical stuff for country or the physical and emotional stuff for our young people, just to be good little humans. We can all do that. We can all learn from that.
I'm curious, what would your piece of advice be for the men out there, the fathers, the dads, that, as a man, we're driven to, build our businesses and our careers and all that. How do we balance that with being a dad as well, when we are so focused, especially if we have a really high, strong mission and purpose like you do with helping the communities? How do you come back and still balance that with being a dad?
What or where's our priorities lie? Like, for me, money comes and goes. As First People as well, we've never had money, we've never had wealth. There's a hell of a lot of our communities that have never owned a home. So, whilst that's important, it's probably not a necessity. The essential and necessary things, I believe, in our life is that we're there present mentally and emotionally for our young people, and to help them be better people and build that relationship and form those early attachments in our life and grow those. Because it don't matter how much money in the world that you got, you are going to be miserable in your life if you don't prioritize things like relationships, health and well-being. There's a hell of a lot of rich people out there that are unwell. right? What was rich to us was our values, was our relationships, was our families. And if we are the oldest continuation of human beings in the planet, and it probably tells you that's a pretty good indication that that's got to be a high priority, because we never had possessions, monetary possessions. We lived in a trade and barter system. You know, we built relationships across the country. We have stories that go from one side of the country to the next, that different people learn and different people know, and different people and communities all have those same stories right across the country. Yeah. So the importance of what we have and how we should be living is about relationships, is about building our family unit mentally and emotionally and spiritually with that. Because we lasted for thousands of years, you know, without monetary possessions.
Do you feel like as men, like we always want more, we're striving for more, or as Western society corrupted that? Because you mentioned Indigenous culture where it's about love, connection, relationship, but now these days it's about building the biggest business and the career and stuff like that. Is that corrupted by Western society?
How's it working for us?
Yeah, not too well.
Our society's sick as. You know, like houses are more expensive than they've ever been. Suicide rates are higher than they've ever been too. Mental health rates are higher than they've ever been. So how's it working for us? Now, again, there's something we can look at and learn from people who have been here for thousands and thousands of years that didn't have these little notes in our wallets. We don't even have notes in our wallets anymore, but we didn't have these little plastic cards that had, money on them. We were rich in relationships, and we lived as a collectivist society, which a lot of Indigenous peoples around the world lived, right? Doing things for others before we do things for ourselves. We don't live in that anymore. That's why we're all not well, because we only care about ourselves, how big our house is, how fast our car is, how rich how big our bank account is, right? How much does that matter when you're in the last days of your life and you're wanting more than anything to spend more time with your kids and your grandkids? Like, do you reckon on the last day out you're going to go, I'm stoked I've got a big house?
No.
You're not. Or on your last days out, are you going to look around and go, I'm so proud of myself that I've raised all this?
Yeah.
And then when our parents, when our young people, our grandkids and our great-grandkids, when we're not here anymore, when you and I are not here anymore, do you reckon they're gonna sit there and go, you know what? My old grandfather Joe, he was a good man. Like, they're going to think about that, how they feel, more than go, Grandpa Joe left me a stack of cash. I'll be more proud of those young people with the values that they live with and the amount of people that they help in what we do. We can be rich in value by our behaviours rather than how much money we got in the bank. Because I know a lot of rich people that have died miserable.
That's the legacy, passing down the knowledge and the values.
When we're building legacies, like, for me, I guess I want it to be on my headstone. Not that I want a headstone, like I don't care about a headstone, because I want to be cremated and thrown in a river somewhere. But for people to remember me, he was a good fella. He was a good fella who would give his last to the next person and did his best for everyone else. Because, like I said, there's a lot of rich people that die miserable, counting the cash. And if you or I sitting here on our last days, we're not going to say, how much money have I got in the bank? We're going to say, who's around me? I wish I could have more days with them. Not I wish I had more money to give them. I wish I had more days with them. That's the important stuff.
How does it make you feel knowing that you're on that path now with, leaving that legacy behind of your kids, grandkids? My dad was that good person that would do anything for us and pass down those stories and those values. he did all the inner work on himself so he could turn up as the best dad for us. How does that make you feel knowing that you're on that journey now?
It's important to say that I'm on the journey because there's still a hell of a long way to go. I'm not anywhere near where I want to be, but I'm a hell of a long way ahead of where I was. So what's tomorrow? What comes tomorrow? If tomorrow comes, I just want to continue on the path that I'm on and continue to learn and develop and grow and implement that to the next person. And how we can do that is by looking back. Like all the answers to how we should be living as people is in our past already. How we treat people, we all know how to treat people good because it's been done somewhere along the line. We know how to treat people shit because it's been done somewhere along the line. So some of the most important things that we can do is just learn to treat people well. And the more you treat people good, the more it comes back to you.
You mentioned your own father. What impact did he have on your life, and what's, the advice that he passed down to you, the values that he passed down to you?
I think my dad grew up in a very different times than me. He had, my nan had, I think it was 11 kids under 30. And 10 of those when 9 or 10 of those when my pop died. Under 30, like 10 kids under 30 when my pop died. Like, that's strength, getting through that. And my dad grew up in an era where he had to be strong. And sometimes you're not allowed to show different, the signs of weakness when you're doing your best in challenging times. And when I mean weakness, I mean physical weakness. Because when you're forced to grow up ahead of your time, you develop in different ways. And my dad has always modeled. My dad has always modeled to me hard work. And whilst I haven't been the hardest worker, I've had sports careers and stuff like that. But whilst I haven't been the hardest worker at that, now that I'm getting older, and my dad's nearly 65 and trains twice a day every day. Like he's modeled to me the importance of physical exercise, and the importance of what that does. And dad's a fit old dude. And anyone who knows my dad knows exactly what I'm talking about. And myself and my dad, we've probably even got closer together as we've got older as well, and had these deep and vulnerable conversations as we've got older. So it's, I think, the importance of relationships with our parents is that it continues to grow. The relationship, and it continues to grow on different levels in different ways. As I said, society traps us into believing that the parent are the authoritarian, and that's all they're supposed to be in life. I probably, whilst dad's always been an authoritarian, he's like a brother as well because of that relationship. He's been there in my hardest times, and he's been there in the good times as well. So there's plenty that we can always learn. There's plenty that we'll continue to learn, and there's plenty that we continue to learn from in building our relationship moving forward.
I've seen you mention that a big piece of advice that he passed down to you was, sitting with that little person inside. How much of impact did that sentence have on you?
Oh, it made a hell of a lot more sense probably 10 years after when I started to do the work on the little person. My dad is a really, really smart guy. And when he talked to me about that little person that lives inside you that's scared and is insecure and those times, and I remember that day, there's not much I remember about that time, but I remember that day and that conversation. And then I'll learn about, 10 years down the path of healing the inner child and the wounded little person inside you. And, so whilst I don't think my dad even understood the psychology of what he was doing then, but it was the most important lesson that I've ever learned. Right? And his analogy and how he did it and delivered it just hit. It hit perfectly. It landed great. And it planted a seed with me that, 10 years down the track, I'm going, shit, that's what Dad was talking about. When I'm learning about all these different things and different theories in psychology textbooks and stuff like that, So my dad probably didn't even understand that that's what it was, but it was by far the greatest advice emotionally that I've ever received of anyone, not just off my dad.
They say kids are resilient, and there's a lot of trapped boys in adult bodies. You say it's not resilience, we form a coping mechanism which can cause dissociation, anxiety, depression, all these things that we're not dealing with now. How do we do that inner work? Where do we start if we want to do that inner work and have that conversation with that little person inside?
Firstly, going to be aware of it.
Yeah.
And that's the conversation. Like we always say that the kids are resilient. Kids aren't resilient. Kids just form coping strategies in challenging times. And whilst that might look like resilience, sometimes those coping strategies aren't particularly healthy. So what is it, resilience? Or are we just building armor and putting up the walls emotionally? That's what we need to have a look at. That's what we need to start to tear down, these walls of emotions and vulnerability and what that looks like. And there's so many walls that all of us have, that the deepest, darkest corridors that we sit in by ourselves the moments before we fall asleep at night. There's so many things that we can learn from in those moments. Those little conversations that we have with ourselves, they're the ticket. They're the ticket to freedom, emotionally and mentally. Right. So what we need to do, and it all comes back down to, again, providing a safe space and secure environment for our young people, so we don't have to build walls. And it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be, because it's just not conducive to the way that we live now. But providing safe spaces mentally and emotionally for young people to be able to express themselves and what it is, and when they do express themselves, us not shutting it down or silencing it, is going to build a better human that mentally and emotionally, that can deal with these challenges rather than just shutting it down. Because what we're seeing right now, right, is this thing we call stigma in mental health, where it might have been a taboo topic for a number of years, but it's not now. But why aren't we talking about it still? It's because forever, from the minute we're born, we're trying to silence kids rather than validate kids and regulate, healthily regulate emotions, right? By telling the kid to shut up, by telling the kid to be quiet, by silencing what it is that they're going through without sitting within that space of empathy and those emotional ties to those young people. By silencing that, we are just contributing to this thing that we call the stigma, because we're just silencing what it is to be human. And we need to get away from that and start to validate what it is with our young people that they're experiencing, and understand it, right? Learn about it and understand it, because that's the most important thing. We can't validate something we don't know or we don't understand. And that's the biggest lessons that I've learned in the last X amount of years, is I understand the teenage brain. I understand the baby brain. I understand the young person brain now, to when they just need when they're in a place of dissociation, sitting there and those walls are up, sitting there and trying to tell them to talk and express what it is that they're going, it's never going to work. So we just need to help them regulate, need them to get to a place of regulation so we can have those conversations when that part of the brain is back online again.
Yeah, that's where I wouldn't say parents go, I don't like to say the word wrong, but parents make the mistake of when a child is having a meltdown and we're flustered ourselves, so we yell at them, but we're not understanding that they're already shut off. So they're not comprehending what's happening right now. They just see my parent yelling at me, so then they feel like they're in trouble, and then it just continues to cycle. But instead, taking a step back, doing the breath, and like, okay, cool, come for a cuddle, hold that safe space for them instead of just lashing out because they don't know what's happening.
That's a reflection of us as well. The minute we lash out, it's because we're triggered by what they're doing. The minute we lash out is because, as a parent, we didn't have somebody sitting with us in those moments when we needed it.
Yeah.
So it's important with we're that circuit breaker with that. Right. If it's triggering us, as you said, take that step back, have a breath, bring the young person in for a cuddle. Right. Learn about regulating emotions. Learn about the nervous system. Because all of the behaviours that we're seeing around mental health now are just a product of the nervous system, a product of things that we've experienced and our body just going into a state of survival to get us through that. So we need to start to learn about that and approach it in a completely different manner than we are now.
What's your relationship like with the little person inside now?
Well, it's better. It's better. It's someone who's still learning as an adult, right? I'm logically an adult now, and my brain capacity is different to what it was and what it's been in the earlier years of my life. I'm compassionate with that little fella now. And as I did some work in Brisbane for a documentary that'll be out next year called Seen. And it's about parenting and you know the impacts that we have on our little people and about being seen. And I was working with the founder of Parent TV, Sam, and she had a little picture of a little person on her phone. I said, "Oh, who's that?" And she said, "That's me." And it intrigued me. And, you know, the person we speak to the most in our life is ourselves. And usually what's the first thing we do when we're trying to dissociate? Usually what's the first thing we do when we're trying to dissociate as an adult now is pick up our phone. And the reason she had the little picture of little Sam on her phone is to sit with that little person. And I'm lucky that I got that now. You know, so those times when I'm scared, those times when I need somebody sitting with me, I can be that parent and sit with that little person and look him deep in the eyes, because that little person on my phone is the exact same story my dad told me the day after he found out about my suicide attempt, when he sat down next to me and he talked to me about the little person that lives inside us. So I've got that picture on my phone now, and every time I get a message, it lights up. Every time I pick up my phone to look at the time, it lights up. And it's just a reminder to sit with that little fella and be gentle with him and let him know that me as the adult, I've got his back. You know, and sometimes that's all we need. You know, when we start to shake and we get upset, we don't know what it is or why we feel that way. It's just that little fella just saying, I need it. I need someone to cuddle me. Right. And whilst we can't go back all those years and cuddle that little person, we can sit there and look in his eyes now on that telephone and say, I got you. And going back to, remember I told you about the airy-fairy parenting tips that you see on social media? I did that one day and I stopped shaking. And my heart rate come down. And I started to function better. And I went, holy shit, it works. So those parenting tips, or those little tools that we see on social media, or even if you're listening or viewing now, they aren't fake. Like, try them and find what works for you. Because when my nervous system's acting up, and it still does, I sit with that little person. I look at my phone and we have a conversation together. And he's talking back to me. You know why? Because that's that same little fella inside my head. So I just encourage everyone to start to do the work on who you are as a little person and what that looks like for you, because it's about the next generation and leaving this place better than we found it. And just giving our young people the tools to be able to get through those challenging times that maybe we didn't have those tools shared with us.
What emotions came up for you just before then?
And now, pride. Yeah, pride. And I'm someone who's deeply emotional. I'm okay with that. Pride did because I know that I'm not anywhere near where I was. There weren't emotions of being sad and crying and because I was stuck. It was all within an instant. It's reflecting over the years of tough stuff that I've been through, and that's well documented. All the challenging times where I couldn't turn to anyone. And then the person now, who I am, all within a moment, all within an instant, just gives that sense of relief and pride that I am the person now that I want to be. And I don't have to run away from that person anymore.
What are you the most proud of?
Probably who I am as a dad. I've been lucky to do some pretty cool things in my life, Nick. I've been really lucky to play sport and be around some really cool people and travel the world with what I do with work. But I'm most like those were stepping stones to get to who I am now. And who I am now is someone that I look at myself in the mirror now and I'm proud of that person. Because it was a long fight. It was a struggle to get to this point. But there's still so much to do and so much to work on, and I'm really lucky that I'm really self-aware. I'm a really self-aware person, so I question things that I think, and I question things that I'm doing, and I dig into that and start to go, all right, why is that there? Why is that happening? So I'm someone who's really conscious of the unconscious. And that, whilst ever I continue to be that, there'll be more growth. And the only way I believe that I've got to that point is because I'm sober. Because I don't run away from everything mentally and emotionally anymore. I sit with the emotions and I understand why they come up.
Joe, what does it mean to you to be a dad?
What does it mean to me to be a dad? It means so many things. it means to feel seen as a dad. Because, think about relationships with your parents, like how many times do we have the deep and the heartfelt and vulnerable and honest relationships throughout our life? We can probably count on one hand how many times we have those relationships. Whilst we don't need to have those relationships all the time, I think they're important. And, I've got younger kids and I've got older kids. And, those younger kids probably take for granted that I'm their dad, right? Because that's what we do. We just think that that's what it is. And then those older kids, it's also the relationship with those older kids has been one of a challenge because, I didn't live with them for a number of years. And even my middle boy, I haven't lived with him for a number of years, but I think the relationship with the 3 older kids that I don't live with are stronger now than they've ever been. And I'm indebted to those 3 forever because it's my duty, my obligation to continue to build that relationship and provide, because I'm aware of this stuff. I can separate the emotions of a dad, but also, I guess, the intellectual ability of what it is that we're experiencing. I can separate that and understand what the importance is of those conversations and what it is and how it is. And I'm really proud of that I can do that. Because it's modeling to them that's what dads do.
Joe, thank you. This has been a deep conversation. I appreciate you for coming on here and opening up and being vulnerable and just being you. And you're an amazing dad. You're on this journey to not only be the best version of you for your kids, but also help other parents and children out there in the community. So, man, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for all the work that you do.
I have got to say that and it comes up when you say that, you're an amazing dad. I wasn't for a long time. And the people who will attest to that is probably not the young people. The people that will know that I wasn't a good dad were the mothers of the kids, of the 3 oldest kids. And, that can be a challenge to have conversations like this when I wasn't that for a long time. So I'm mindful of that. And again, my responsibilities and my obligations are to, without doubt, to the kids, but it's also about helping to educate my kids so they can be better for their next generation. So I acknowledge that I wasn't the best, and it can be hard for some people to hear that I'm a good dad because I wasn't for a long time. And I don't profess to be the best now still. I'm growing, and I'm someone who's accountable to growing into be the best I possibly can. And I will continue to do that every single day. I open my eyes and continue to be the best that I can. And what that looks like is different for the different age groups because of the different relationships we've had and not had and continuing to grow. But then the young people as well, that I can be conscious and present and a good, available dad within that every single day. Thanks, brother, to be here. It's been a great conversation. As I said, I'm an emotional person, but I'm okay with that because whoever sits and watches or sits and listens to this, I can share that I cry, and I cry a lot, and that's okay because it's a natural human emotion that we all go through, and more than anything, I'm okay to model that to the young people because they're the important ones in all of this.
You're human, brother. You're human.
Thanks for having me, mate.
We have a closing tradition where the previous guest leaves a question for the next guest without knowing who it is. So the question for you is, right now, if you had a black button and this button could give you all your wishes fulfilled, but in doing so, someone around the world will pass away. You don't know who it is. Could be someone close, could be someone random. Would you press that black button?
Say that again so I can understand it again.
If there's a black button here, you press it, all your wishes are fulfilled. But when you press that button, someone dies. It could be someone close to you, it could be someone random around the world. Would you press that black button?
No, not in a million years. Because all of our wishes that we have are just figments of our imagination. And all the wishes that we have, all the wishes that I have, are things that I can control. You know, whether it's financial things, I can make steps in my life to do things better financially. Whether it's the love and relationship I have with my kids or my parents, my brothers and sisters, aunties and uncles, I have the ability to make those relationships work. So all the wishes that I have in my life, me personally, don't involve anything extrinsic. All the wishes that I have are everything about who we can be as good people and better people and intrinsic values. So for me, wishes, I believe, are just figments of our imagination. And we have the ability as people every day to do the best we can to make those wishes come true, whatever they are. Wishes are something that we've dreamt up, and everything that we've dreamt up, we have the ability to make steps personally to achieve that. So for me, my wishes, I'm still continuing to work on what they are and how to bring them into reality with my life.
Joe, thank you.
Thanks, brother.